Hey people of California, tonight I've analyzed conservative and liberal interest groups, types of linkage institutions, and their positions on abortion. In general, a linkage institution is a structure within a society that connects the people of that society to their government or centralized authority. As I stated before, tonight I'll be focusing on three specific sources of interest groups. An interest group is a linkage institution that is a natural outgrowth of the communities of the interests that exist in all societies. The three sources I will analyze tonight are NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Planned Parenthood, and the Susan B. Anthony list and their views and interests of abortion. All right, the first source I analyzed was NARAL, Pro-Choice America, and their point of view and arguments for abortion. The political ideology of this source is clearly liberal. The source stresses the belief in government action to achieve equal opportunity and equality for all. Basically, in terms of abortion, a woman has the right to decide what happens with her body, and since the fetus is not yet a human life, it does not have separate individual rights from the mother. NARAL's point of view on the topic at hand is that it should be legal and equally accessible among all women in the United States. They believe that the decision to have an abortion is a personal choice of a woman regarding her own body, and the government must protect this right. They state that women have the right to affordable, safe, and legal abortions, including partial birth abortions. This source is pretty biased because it includes a lot of personal experience. There are within the source quotes of many women that have been in support of abortion and why. The stories most often include how abortion was a very positive experience for them and how NARAL has helped them support their choice. Never in the stories are the opposing viewpoints really judged fairly or equally. NARAL's Pro-Choice America clearly states their opinion on safe, legalized abortions, and they provide lots of evidence to support this claim. They provide statistics about the Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade, and the case's outcome, public opinion, and public support. They provide comparisons of the past, present, and hopeful futures of their community. As I talked about before, they incorporate a lot of personal experiences in the stories they share about women involved with NARAL and their real experiences. Not only do they provide these personal experiences, but they also provide expert opinions from Wendy Davis, a pro-choice advocate. I think that's some of their most reliable information comes from their research they've clearly done about their topic. They know a lot about the past of this issue and how it's evolved over time, the individual states' opinions, and even where the state opinions originated from and why. All of the evidence to support their claims really strengthens their arguments. It shows that they're educated, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and the time and the effort they've put into their work, I think, really shows their passion and dedication in the pro-choice stance on abortion. This makes NARAL very trustworthy and reliable in terms of their work and promises. On the contrary, however, a major logical fallacy I recognized while analyzing this source was that of the false analogy fallacy. NARAL states that a woman cannot have an abortion if the nearest center to acquire an abortion is 3 hours away. While the nearest center being 3 hours away does make the process a lot more difficult, it does not, in fact, make it impossible. NARAL also states that women are an extreme minority. To me, this doesn't seem like much of a fact, as statistically in the United States, women vote more than men, and especially in the topic of abortion, there are more women present in arguments than there are men. For the second source I analyzed Planned Parenthood and their point of view and arguments over abortion. The political ideology of this source is pretty moderate, as they don't seem to advocate extreme liberal politics, nor do they seem to advocate extreme conservative politics. In this situation, it means that Planned Parenthood isn't necessarily fighting for pro-choice or pro-life. They're more focused on how to go about educating the public in the topic of abortion, more focused on educational rights, not really abortion or life rights. Planned Parenthood's point of view on the topic is that all men and women should be educated on the topic and their various options when it comes to having a child, whether or not it was indeed planned. They believe that education is a right and should be accessible to all and denied to no one. They also believe that people should be educated before they really need to be, in order to help promote better decisions of individuals before a potential problem proposes itself. I really don't think that this source is very biased because they really do present every possible side and option available. Even when it comes specifically to the topic of abortion, they present sides of the argument extremely fairly, logically, equally. They really say everything. Planned Parenthood claims that education regarding abortion is very valuable and very important in both men and women's lives, not just women's. In order to support their viewpoints, Planned Parenthood provides statistics about their care and services, research about their organization's past, their supporters, and how their educational services have helped people throughout the country. Their organization also argues less in terms of pro-choice or pro-life, making more arguments and references towards the importance of all processes and educational outreach programs involved, as I've stated before. All of the evidence that Planned Parenthood provides really supports and even strengthens their positions and ideas largely because of the lack of bias in the source and the large quantity of facts. The exploration of all possibilities regarding abortion is very prominent in this source's information, and the fair and equal treatment of all viewpoints makes this source so much more reliable. One logical fallacy I was able to identify within this source was possibly that of the bandwagon appeal, meaning that a claim or an idea should be accepted because a large number of people favor it and believe it to be true. An example of this that I saw in the argument was when Planned Parenthood stated that they are America's most trusted provider for reproductive health care. This statement pretty clearly represents this logical fallacy because since they don't provide any evidence to support this statement, they kind of take a favoritism stance. The final source I analyzed tonight was the Susan B. Anthony list and their point of view in arguments over abortion. The political ideology of this group is pretty clearly conservative. The source states that human life begins at conception and that abortion is the murder of a human being. They believe that an unborn baby, as a living human being, has separate rights from those of the mother, separate from what Narl stated earlier on. The Susan B. Anthony list's point of view on abortion is that it is basically an equivalent to murder and should be ruled as illegal. They oppose taxpayer-funded abortion and believe that taxpayer dollars should not be used for the government to provide abortions. This source is incredibly biased as it contains logical fallacy after logical fallacy, which I'll talk more in detail about a little bit later. To explain for now, the source basically has abortion being equal to murder as its biggest defense and support without much legitimate claim and evidence connection. The Susan B. Anthony list claims that abortion is murder and the baby has separate rights from those of the mother. To support their claims, the source uses a lot of situational comparisons and analogies. They also use a lot of personal experiences. For instance, they have lots of videos of families that kept their babies when abortion was suggested and how amazing their lives have been since the decision. The organization does show some expert opinion in interviewing candidates in support of pro-life decisions. They do not, however, really ever in their argument present opposing viewpoints clearly and fairly. I believe that the types of evidence the source has provided weakens their argument more than it strengthens it because they really don't have a lot of reliable evidence, and the amount of bias they include in their arguments and statements is very abundant and prominent. I can identify several logical fallacies such as hasty generalization, false analogy, and red herring. An example of a logic fallacy in their argument is that abortion is, in fact, the equivalent of murder. Because this is more of an opinion-based statement rather than a factual statement, I don't believe it can be used as valid in their argument and isn't a very strong supporting statement. So those were the sources I analyzed and what I thought of them. For my personal reflections and opinions and beliefs, I believe that of these sources, NARAL, Pro-Choice America, and Planned Parenthood really best represent and support my political values and beliefs, as I'm a pretty liberal person myself, and they both at least somewhat support liberal ideas. That said, the pro-choice candidates that I'm most aware of and have done the most research on, and I believe support my political values, are candidates such as Mike McGuire, Richard Pan, Luis Chavez, Connie Leyva, Ben Allen, and Sandra Fluke. Media outlets that support my values are totally mixed. I think there's a huge variety of them. I mean, there's specific newspapers and news channels and books and magazines that sometimes they'll provide an article or a segment that I really agree with, and sometimes it's totally the opposite. I completely disagree with what the article or segment says. Other than articles specifically about, for instance, NARA or Planned Parenthood, I'll tend to agree more with those because they're about them, unless it's an article providing counter arguments to those organizations. The point of view that represents me is that in addition to being legal, I think abortion should be a topic that every woman and even every man, to an extent, has sufficient knowledge about. I do believe, though, that a woman must be aware of all of her options and the pros and cons for each option before she makes a decision. I think that abortion should really be an educated decision, not just something off the whim like, oh, no, abortion is for me or it's not for me. I think that education is really key in this issue. To make use of linkage institutions, I will definitely be voting as soon as I fulfill all state requirements. I am not yet actually of age to vote, so that's my major conflict there. Elections are probably the largest way I'll use my voice in the political process, unless opportunity really presents itself to be voiced in other ways, such as TV interviews or polls that are presented. But I don't necessarily think I'll go seeking those out. In conclusion, I think that abortion should be legalized nationwide and equally accessible to all. To be honest, I'm not sure where I'd start in addressing this issue, as it's such a widely debated topic today, and it seems very complicated. I think I'd start by trying to remove all bias from everything I read and literally just stating the facts and going from there, seeing not only what most people want, but I think what makes most sense for our nation and makes most sense in terms of civil rights and liberties. So that's all. Those were the sources I analyzed and my own personal opinions and reflections. I thank you for watching and thank you for listening.